very warm welcome to Capital Sports 3.0. I am your co-host for this evening, Alan Moore. I'm going to be joined in just one moment from out in Siberia by Mr. Andrew Flint, our man out in Siberia. What have we got for you tonight? Well, I mean, it's been a crazy week of sports, a crazy week of sports news, and we're going to tackle kind of three topics, three areas that are going to be mentioned a lot this week. So be prepared for them because they're going to grow. We're getting ahead of the game because these have been ones that have been just happened or are in the process of happening or taking place. But you'll see now in just one moment. So we are going to speak about flags. Yeah, so what happens when one country is not allowed to display a flag, another country is? Should all flags be banned? For me, I have no issue with any flags anywhere. It's just kind of the people, as we say, behind them. Homophobia reared its ugly head, as well as a lot of insults related to hair loss, to cheating on wives, and so on, in an absolutely disgusting press conference this week between Chris Eubank Jr. and Liam Smith. It's promoted their fight yesterday, which of course ended in a fourth round knockout, I should say, for Smith over Eubank. Really went too far, and a lot of people, including our own Eastwood Cody and former colleague of ours, Danny Armstrong, they also were pretty much taken aback by the absolute venom and what went on in the press conference. We'll have a little clip of it just in a few minutes. And also domestic abuse in sports. 3 incidents reared their heads in the last little while, and one is going to run, and it involves a Barcelona legend, Dani Alves. His story is pretty bad, but what's going to come out in court, what we've been told, is going to be an awful lot worse. But straight away, I'm going to go out to Siberia and welcome in Andrew Flint. Andrew, good evening. Or I should say, almost early morning. How are you doing?
Well, yeah, it is nearly early morning. Time doesn't really matter. The most important thing is it's time for Capital Sports. I'm very well, boss. How are you today?
I'm doing good, actually. I played snow rugby yesterday. Now, that's strange. I should be playing slow rugby, but I played snow rugby instead. And I won't take off my trousers and show you my knees, but both knees are absolutely destroyed. And I commented on a friend of ours, Andy Max Brothers Stew, and I said that like my knees are in bits from yesterday. And he said, "What were you doing?" And I was like, "Don't ask." Immediately that went off into the wrong direction. Then a group of people then mentioned, like, why are your knees scraped? What happened to your knees? Like, it was like playing snow rugby in shorts.
Obviously, of course.
So anyway, and then of course Skelly football translator, well, that was okay. Listen, Andrew, I want to start off. I'm going to play just a little clip we'll start off with domestic abuse, this whole situation, because unfortunately Iseult is just back. She was delayed by I think almost like 5 hours coming back from Manchester today on her Ryanair flight. She won't be able to make it, unfortunately. However, we want to bring this up to her, and this is we say a slap that was heard around the world. That's related to wrestling, well, actually just wrestling in general. When one wrestler slapped a journalist to say, this is real, because when wrestlers give you a slap, people think it's not real. This is one that happened, just not too long ago, and there was alcohol involved, but this has led on to something else. So just one moment, just have a look at this clip. This is the full clip from a nightclub. Oh, that is strange. I have to try that again. And that is Dana White. He is the big man pumped up behind UFC. Everyone knows who he is. And that was him with his wife, Anne. Now, as it's clearly seen, and the start of it was blurred out by a lot of people where she slapped him and he, I hate to say in this way, returned the favor. Now, both have apologized. Both have said there was a lot of alcohol involved, that they were both drunk, that they were arguing, that they both made a huge mistake. They shouldn't have done it. UFC have just left him in place, and now he started up his slap league, which of course he took from the Russian version of what they basically, 2 people stand across from each other, men and women, and they slap each other across the face. Should he have walked, or is this a kind of a case of she shouldn't have hit him in the first place?
Well, I don't think anybody really realistically expects him to walk, simply because he has a brand to protect. I mean, the video doesn't look great. It doesn't matter what context you spin on it. I mean, it doesn't look great from both angles, but I mean, fairly obviously, when you're a man and a well-built man as well, delivering a slap to anybody, any female person, regardless of whether they're your wife or not, is just disgusting to see. I mean, he is a man engaged in combat in every sense of the word. Combat sports, obviously, that's his job, but creating conflict, creating drama, creating blowing up explosive moments, that's what he's built his entire career around. And I don't think it is, I mean, it's incredibly stereotypical, this, but I don't think it's so hard. It's not hard to be surprised by seeing something like that. He may claim it's all alcohol fueled and try and brush it under the carpet, which is effectively what has happened. It's tried to, we'll just quietly push it under the carpet, and I hope nobody notices. How can nobody notice? The man is he's in the promotion business. He's very good at the promotion business, and part of the promotion business is managing potentially borderline acceptable, and this is not borderline, I'm just saying in general, this is what he's part of. I think he blurs the lines in his job. He promotes the most explosive, the bloodiest, which can lead to examples of horrific injuries, horrific lack of care almost. It's very easy to draw the parallel between that and what we've just seen there. Now, I mean, okay, she has come out and said, look, it was a lot of alcohol involved. We can see she does deliver the first slap. Why did she deliver the first slap? I don't think she does that out of nothing. There's an argument, clearly a disagreement, something that is disagreed about between them. Is he completely blameless for the first slap? It's not actually relevant who's to blame for the first, second slap at all. You can't hide, and you should not be able to hide from something like that. And yet, Alan, what do you think? Do you honestly think we're going to see Dana White see any negative effect from this video? And are you surprised?
No, and I think it's amazing that he launched his Power Slap League, which, if you look at for Dana White slap in Google, his Power Slap League comes to the top. So it's almost like super clever what they did. I almost, in one way, and I don't want to believe it, as you said, this is a guy who has made his career of being, steroid buffed up guy who encouraged guys to call each other homophobic names, who encourage ultra violence, who wants this show. Did they actually slap each other, or was it just fate released, knowing that this was a setup, that this is basically glorified, as I've always said about UFC, and I make no apologies for it, it's glorified world wrestling entertainment. It is like Vince McMahon, we look at this going, how, this is brilliant. He got away with it. That must be scripted, Andrew. And this is what my belief is, because, okay, number one, women have no right to hit men. Number two, men have no right to hit women. That's it. Simple as that. There was two wrongs. They do not make a right. But I really believe that White and UFC, they're making money off this Power Slap League because of Andrew.
Well, the Power Slap League, for time, you say, was the concept of scripted. My first instinct was, I can't believe that's a concept, but then it makes sense. I mean, look, the Power Slap League, this is something we've seen over here, and Dumpling, I believe, is the name of the Russian star, the enormously big bone fella, shall we say. It is seen, I mean, he's seen as a bit of that's a macho thing to do. It is the very, very worst of, well, it's not part of combat sport. You see punches of people who are prepared. That's the whole point. I mean, it is just asking for brain damage. It's asking for horrific injuries. This is not a test of endurance. It's not a test of pain. It is just pure gratuitous lust for damage. I mean, it's just bizarre beyond belief. I mean, we've seen other versions over here as well of the all-female, not even championship, where they strike each other on the behind and they doll them up, and it is, even that is just so. I don't even know what the word is. It's uncomfortable to look at it, but you know exactly what they're doing. They know it will get a few retweets, a few likes. It will get shared around. It might not take off. It might do. Nobody really cares. Okay, that's very different to striking somebody across the face. And it's not just the fact we've seen this launch. I've been inundated. I actually was quite surprised. I heard about it from my friends back in the UK, in the States. They said, "Oh, I can't believe this power slap thing." I thought they were talking about the Russian version. I didn't realize it was this whole new promotion. And everybody is sickened by it. Everybody's absolutely sickened by it. But in all of those clips, I would argue probably about half of the clips we see spreading on social media and online at the moment are the slow motion ones. The ones where you see exactly how impacted into and through the cheekbones the actual hand goes. Because when you see a quick version of a slap, you think, well, okay, it's a slap, great. But they want to show the damage. They don't just want to see a slap. That shows you what the focus is. And the worst part, it works.
Yeah.
It gets attention.
That is true. And look, people are, as you said, they're sharing the worst of it. But this goes back again, what I say to UFC, and this goes back to what I look at, or I believe to be, the kind of gamer boy and girl who sit there with their PlayStation and gore fest. You watch a lot of movies. The Expendables was one that they deliberately said, the second part of it, they opened with this absolute slaughter. I watched it. I didn't see the first one, but I saw the second in the cinema. I almost walked out. I was thinking, "Oh, this is not good. This is too brutal. This is too gory." But and then it stopped, and then it was brilliant. Then Chuck Norris came into it, and it was funny, genuinely funny. Sylvester Stallone said afterwards, "We did that to catch the attention of the kids who play computer games." And then they made a movie, and it was a bloody good movie as well. But again, they had to get the attention. And same to Power Slap, like, look at his disfigured face, one slap knockout. And I'm thinking, that's you know, first of all, it's not a sport. It's healthy.
Alan, let me make this is not my personal opinion, but I'm voicing the opinion of a large group of people who are appealed to by this sort of thing. Those snapshots, those moments, they draw people in. There's no point trying to dispute it. It draws people in. I'm not saying in a tasteful way. I'm specifically saying not in a tasteful way. But those clips of the impact, seeing somebody knocked down, is there any argument at all, and I think you probably know where I'm going with this, is there any argument at all that could draw a comparison to knockout moments of kickboxing? I mean, on my Facebook feed,
boxing as well. We can say, like, you know,
of any sports, of MMA. I saw one clip on my social media feed because I've been trying to watch some of these, to research what we need to talk about, and my Facebook feed throws up the best knockouts, and I'm watching these fighters' names that I know, but I've not watched so much, and I'm watching these really, really gory knockouts, if I'm honest. There was one submission, a standing, sort of, I don't know the exact name, a sort of a chokehold in UFC. It was a standing choke, and you're looking at the person's face, the eyes, and there's that chilling moment when the eyes just glaze over and the person is not there. And the referee steps in, and obviously you said, "Okay, fight's over. You've won by submission." There's a big difference in the presentation, but there is, at the very base core of it, some link, whether people like to admit it or not. I think some people could argue between moments of knockout. Is that something he is simply tapping into? It's just the Gen Z TikTok shock and awe version of a heavyweight boxer landing a knockout. I mean, I don't know.
More Gen Z, Andrew. Honest to God, I think it's more. If it was just Gen Z, it's my generation, it's your generation. Like there's enough, like we're from two slightly different generations. Like I would be, you're Gen Y, I'd be Gen X. But there's enough people. I'm sorry, I worked it out because of Tim. Like, I had a moment. He calls me boomer. I think you know this. He calls me boomer.
I get so lost. I don't know which term is which probably defines me in one of the categories. No idea.
Yeah. And I said, Tim, I'm not a boomer. Then we're on the train from Gdansk to Warsaw. And the woman comes around like, oh, you want some tea, coffee, chocolate? And I'm going, okay, get a couple of tea. We have our I'll say KFC there. So we're eating at KFC, have some tea. And then she says, oh, I like some chocolate. And I looked, okay. And then I saw a bar. I picked it up. It said Mega Boomer. Tim was in such delight.
That must have made his day.
Yeah, I'll put a shot of it in a moment. But like this whole situation, Andrew, I mean, gore has always fascinated people. We see it now with the conflict in Ukraine, where when I say all sides, everybody's looking, look at dead bodies here. And they talk about death as if it's like sending people in to be slaughtered, no matter where they're from.
It's an inevitable feature of life. That's the way it's presented in so many ways.
Exactly. And it's this kind of thing of like, it just happens, like, you know, it just was there, like Frank Howdy, violence porn. And
violence porn is a perfect way to put it. Yeah. It's an addiction where you're blinded as to what is actually being shown to you because, oh my God, I can't believe it.
And I'll tell one, when I was in Saudi Arabia, so this would have been 2002. So September 11 happened, Afghanistan had happened, and then I remember students that were there, they were 17, 18, 19-year-old, they were in the academy, and they were playing a video, and it was a video of a beheading, and they said, oh, it's Russians are beheading, like, I was like, what? And they were shot with a knife, and oh God, it's horrible, I can still see it. It was basically Chechnya, where Chechens were beheading a Russian soldier. But they watched this video and I'm thinking, oh, it's normal. I was like, no, that's not normal. Bro, go back a step. On a Friday afternoon, which is called, it's their Sunday in Saudi Arabia. I was walking in Jeddah and I met one of the guys who we worked with. And he said, oh, well, hello, and like, you know, kiss both cheeks. And he's like, well, I was like, here. And he goes, oh, come with us. We're going to go for tea. And I was like, oh, why not? Like, you know, and I was like, you know, I'm a few months in the country. Like, I mean, would have been, I always forget it was like either before I went to Egypt or after. So it was like December or January. But anyway, it was like December, January. Went down to a place brought with them huge crowds. I'm thinking, okay, what's this? Place called Chop Chop Square. Chop Chop Square is where they behead people in public. I was brought in with these guys to the front, so I'm the only non-Muslim. They've had their Friday prayers, the biggest day of the week, their prayers. All the people are out waiting for their floggings and their execution. There was one execution and they were waiting for it. I still remember that. I'll always remember that. That's always stuck in my head. And these people just thought this was great. When fellas were being tied down to a bench and whipped, they were like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, he deserves it. And I'm like, no. I mean, we always say like pedophile killed, but no, it's just so wrong. And this now is mainstream. They show, you know, the way that the media are talking about, send in leopard tanks, look, why send for, and I'm going both sides. I say here, arguing against the Russian side escalating. Stop, please talk. But the violence porn, the absolute addiction to this violence is everywhere. People will have fights in an American diner. They'll say, oh, look at this, like, or guys who I know who I like a lot will joke about it, say, oh, like you see them climbing over the counter in a McDonald's and start attacking the staff. And they share those videos. And I'm going, that's really horrible. But it's like, oh, well, that's society. Well, it's not. It's not society.
By sharing it, by saying, look at this, you're trying to make it part of society. For me, it's a completely, this might sound odd, but for me, I draw parallels between that and people who argue in football, for example, the dark arts of fouling and cheating somebody at pass a game. No, they're not. You're trying to make it acceptable by trying to legitimize just simply by saying, look how well he did that. Just because you look how well somebody has managed to cheat the system, or far worse in this example, of course, inflict just gratuitous violence for the sake of it, that doesn't make it part of life or society. Although I will say though, Alan, you mentioned about that experience in Saudi Arabia. I think it's incredibly important at this point, before people think we are honing in on Saudis. This has been the same in every single country in the world at some time or another, and not actually all that long ago. I mean, the beginning of the 20th century, in many countries, Western countries, supposed to be civilized countries, a good old hanging to show a lesson.
That's what. Listen, this is what I said. Like, you know, people are like sent to town or London, there were public executions. People get
there. You go, King Arthur. Just made exactly the point I was going to say. Exactly. Executions always have been public. They've never been hidden away in secret, in private. So look, this is the punishment. We have capital punishment, but you know, it's going to happen. But that's it. No, it's always been a show. It's always been a show.
Most people remember the bridge in Rwanda, where refugees were running, trying to get across the bridge. I always forget it was into Uganda, and they're trying to escape the slaughter. And they're running across the bridge. And Fergal Keane, the reporter, he was at BBC at the time, was there speaking. And behind him, you could see the rebels coming in and just hacking people to death. And he ran back and saved a child. That was normalized. We saw the same in Yugoslavia. So it was this non-stop gore, violence, and yet, this is what we're enjoying from sport. You said most brutal knockouts. When they put stuff about Roy Keane, which I think is so wrong, most of them think about his tackle of Mark Overmars that got Ireland to the World Cup, or brutal tackles and taking out Haaland. And the funny thing, he was asked not that long ago on an Irish TV show, but didn't you break up Haaland the whole lot? And Keane said, no, he played a few days later. People were of the belief that he destroyed Haaland's career. He didn't. Haaland got up and played. He did went to take him out. He said that. He said, take that. But I don't know. We'll have to move on for the. Sorry, Wonder. Say the last one.
Well, no, just very, very briefly. I don't want to come across as a moralizer here. The Alvinga Haaland, Roy Keane incident, I am as guilty as anybody else, because in that moment, what I saw was a form of justice. The player who plays for my team, who was taunted and in a fairly tasteless way when he was genuinely injured, and he thought, right, I'm going to get my revenge. I thought good. And then I think, hang on a minute, I just said good about that physical act in public, in full knowledge of how it would be received. So I'm as bad as anybody else.
Listen, I remember I was in university, spoke about it the next day because it was on TV, when Eric Cantona was being sent off, was attacked, had hot tea thrown on him, was verbally and physically abused because he would see stuff thrown on him, hot tea thrown over him. And he jumped across, did his kung fu kick across at the guy, and then was attacked. Now, at the time, I thought, wrong. Still think wrong thing to do. However, what gave anyone the right to attack a person walking off the field? What gave anyone the right to throw tea at him, to abuse him? It doesn't matter what they we're going to come at it in a moment. Like, it doesn't matter what they threw at him, or if they kicked him or threw stuff at him. They felt that they were allowed. We spoke about this before. You have a ticket to go in to abuse someone on the field. You know, that to me, and I'm personally say, Jesus, ref, or I might complain, but at the same time, it stuck with me one time when I did it. Danny, who played for United and he went to Turkey. I forget the Portuguese player, Nani. Nani was playing his locomotive, and he dove. He dove to get a free kick, and I said, "You," and I went, "You cheat! Get up!" Tim was beside me, and then Tim went, "Dad, you shouldn't say that. You hurt his feelings." Now we're up in the VIP box, and Tim's only little. He goes, "You should say that." It's like, what? You shouldn't call him a cheat. It's like, okay. He said, "No, you have to apologize to him because he'd been in kindergarten and sort of if you say something, you apologize." I said, fair enough. Now we did actually go down after the game. He was on, and I said, "Sorry," and he's like, "Whatever," like, you know. But we're going to move very, very quickly on because there's two instances. We're going to cover this and then we'll jump into the boxing one. Great again, Cian. Great to. We'll see you next week. Thank you very, very much, Arthur. Yeah, dead on. And actually, something Arthur just said just here messages. Big tech is poison society. That's true, and we are using big tech to speak about it. But we also kind of look. Oh, wait, let's roll back. Let's try to be a bit more civilized. The one thing that came out, one issue, shall we say, that came out was about Courtney Beale. Now, Beale is, of course, the Australian international rugby player, and he is up because of basically a sexual assault. The whole thing was that he was charged. Okay, he was charged with 2 counts of sexually touching another person without consent, inciting another to sexually touch them without consent, and sexual intercourse without consent. And this is about a 28-year-old woman who was allegedly sexually assaulted at a licensed premise on Bondi Beach. And this was just last December. I'll follow on with that, okay, because Beale hasn't commented. He was just called back into the Australian team for the World Cup, building up towards the World Cup in France. Another one which was even, I found almost as shocking, but not as surprising. And that was Dani Alves. Dani Alves, he is now, he's been detained in Barcelona since this past Friday. He had sexually assaulted a woman in a nightclub on the 30th. He'd been back to celebrate New Year's with his wife, who is from there, who's from Barcelona. And the situation was simply that she alleged he raped her in a nightclub toilet. He then left quite quickly after the rape, the alleged rape, went back to Mexico where he's playing. He's 39 years of age. He's playing in the Liga MX. And he came back for his mother-in-law's funeral and was arrested. Just those two, Andrew. I mean, I can tell stories that I know from here in Russia, for example, with professional footballers, with some Brazilian players, for example, and their behavior. But this is awful. We talked with Dana White, and I again still think he was hyping it up for his Parasat League with this whole thing because immediately, boom, it takes off. Now, it could be the case, could be wrong, could be just 2 drunken idiots around with each other like tramps in the street. I don't know. But this one with Alves and with Courtney Beale, these are real black marks against sport because we've seen it in English football, but these are 2 extremely famous and accomplished individuals doing it kind of towards the end of their careers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just well, I mean, this in one sense, there's almost nothing you can say. I mean, it's right there in front of you. We'll have to, of course, wait and see how the proceedings continue. Dani Alves stood out for me a little bit because he had been, up until this point, incredibly well respected throughout the world of sport, not just for being a phenomenal athlete. You know, he's at the age of 39, is he still playing top level professional football? His demeanor is always one that everybody seemed to like him. He seemed to, be relatively convivial. You know, there's that attitude of, well, I'm going to play football for fun. He was almost a bit of almost an embodiment of Brazilian samba football flair and fun and entertainment. Nobody could think of anything negative against you. You couldn't imagine him being an aggressor. I mean, he was brought back to Barcelona only last year or a year before to basically show leadership in a squad that at the time was struggling, to be honest. A lot of overpaid players, and there he was. He was coming back as an example, as a leader, a married leader as well. We need to have both of these 2 people we mentioned married. I almost wonder, it's the end of the fact you mentioned as well. Both of these people, Beale and Dani Alves, at the end of their career, why? At the beginning, I mean, never, why ever, of course, but I wouldn't for a second excuse any sexual assault. Of course not. But there is, unfortunately, a level of misguidedness about younger, fame-hungry sports stars, but sports stars who have been there, they've done it, they cemented their legend. to be as misguided and just morally absent at that stage of your career, at that stage of your life, with a family, it's quite unsettling, to be honest. They're not the characters. Well, certainly Danny Alves. Certainly, I wouldn't have thought. Do you ever think somebody is the character to be involved in something like this? Because they know the attention is all on them, and it should be dealt with extremely, extremely firmly. It should not be allowed to be swept under the rug. And that's a phrase I hate myself for saying, but how often do we find ourselves saying about Dana White earlier? I just said it will be swept under the rug. It will be swept under the rug. There's no point trying to pretend it won't be. And unfortunately, it feels wrong, but it shouldn't matter at all. But it does feel slightly wrong that there's a player who embodies everything that we like about sport, a competitor, but relative, that demeanour, that sense of joy about it. His legacy will be ruined, and it absolutely should be. That's an example. Now, there's another very high-profile player of a similar age who is also still playing professional football, who, well, I won't say his name, but I think we know roughly who I'm probably hinting at, who ought to be facing similar charges. Image matters more. And
listen,
that's needed a PR.
Yeah.
It allows. Now, the question that really bothers me now. We know the power of PR, how people will make sure something disappears. How much have we missed? How much are we missing?
Listen, too much, Andrew. I mean, again, I'll say it like some of the Brazilian players in Moscow, for example, in Spartak, their behavior was just absolutely reprehensible. And what they did, how they behaved, was disgusting. And realistically, people were paid off to stay quiet. And these were some leading Brazilians who were here, not Brazilians who ended up playing for Russia, but Brazilian players. And people kind of talk about them. And when I hear the stories, when I heard stories at the time, it was shocking. It was just like, Jesus, that's disgusting. That's why are they behaving like? And basically, they just didn't care because they had too much money.
Lack of accountability. Accountability.
That's it. We're going to move very, very quickly to a break and then come back in just a couple of minutes. We're going to we've got a lot more to get through, so we're going to get through it just a minute. So just be back with us in literally in 1 minute.
Has anybody in this room ever seen you with a girl? Have you got something to tell us, really? Because you're 33. You said on the programme, when you have kids, I know this is just for no laughs or nothing. Do you want to tell us something? You're putting pictures up with Neymar in limousines. Do you want to tell us something? Because nobody in this room has ever seen you with a woman.
Listen, my private life is my private life. That's irrelevant to the boxing. But listen, I'm happy. I'm comfortable. I'm
if you're happy, and just tell us. It's not a dig.
What would you like to know?
Have you got something to tell us? You want to tell us? You're 33. You're going on about you having kids. You've got to have a woman to have a kid, mate. Like, do you want to tell us something? Nobody's ever seen you.
If you've got a personal question to ask me directly, then you can slide in my DMs, or you can do it right now. But
I'm not that type of way, mate. I like women.
Liam Smith and Chris Eubank Jr. mentioned at the top of the show. There was an awful lot more to this, and there were two of them at it. Eubank had gone on about that there's lots of and he did it deliberately. Lots of unemployed Liverpoolians. Liverpool really is in depression. It's a hit hard in the country, and Liam is here. He should be their hero, and blah blah blah. It was like an insult against people from Liverpool, and it was very very uncalled for. The next thing Smith came back with, let's talk about your hairline, or your beard. It's like painted on, it's tattooed on, it's not your real thing, and blah blah blah. then all of a sudden, you might get back with, oh, that's a bit fruity, and you cheat on your wife. And then he turned around to, after all this, he turned around to Smith and said, I'd rather be gay than a cheat. It was actually disgusting. And unfortunately, a lot of idiots in the crowd were laughing, ha, 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 ha. And I mean, just even from that alone, it shows why for men, women, they don't give a damn. But for men, it's extremely difficult to come out, like to actually admit that they're gay. Or even, he couldn't say, I'm not gay, because if he did, then, hello, what is there something wrong with being gay? But in that whole situation, his sexuality or his sexual orientation was used to knock him down, and people lapped it up, and it was shared, and it was all happy times promoting a boxing fight.
Well, it's a shareable clip. It is again, sadly, in my opinion, yet another example of a gore fest in terms of your language. I mean, okay, it's not physical, but it's exactly the same. The promoters would have loved that. Yes, they publicly have to say, we spoke to them and said, you can't use language like that. They love that. There's no point trying to pretend otherwise, because that is now a clip that everybody has watched. And now the spin-off shows that the broadcasters do with interviews before, more people are going to watch it, advertising revenue goes up. It's the cycle we all live in. The use of, I mean, you notice how Liam Smith used the reference there as well. I think that is also extremely telling. He was trying to be, in his mind, probably thought he was being clever. He was trying to be so careful not to ask directly, are you gay? I mean, it was so repeated. He was pushing and hammering this angle home. It was used as a negative slander, but he wanted to try and cover himself by not actually saying the words, look, mate, are you gay? You know, but when I first saw it, my first reaction was, well, look, he's trying to have a dig, and we know full well that it is just a depressing way, a lack of wit. If you are that short of ideas, we all know what, you know, boxing fights are promoted. We need a bit of needle, we need a bit of edge. And yes, okay, sometimes it spills over, but if you can't think of anything better than to try and use sexuality as an insult, it's just, I mean, Arthur saying there, do you think it's all choreographed to sell tickets? I wouldn't say necessarily choreographed, but very much welcomed by the promoters. That's my personal opinion. I may be wrong, but I suspect I'm not wrong. The damage that has done is irreparable. I mean, it's immeasurable quite how far that has set back what was already a very, very challenging atmosphere in sports. I'm not trying to single out boxing here. Let's be honest. We've seen very similar barbs, comments made in all sorts of sport. I mean, the pressure, we try and pretend that action is being taken. There were these flashy hashtag campaigns of, you know, no to racism, of one love. What the hell does a hashtag do? Does that honestly tell anybody? Does that honestly make anybody think that, well, we're becoming more welcoming? We've seen the highest profile, I would argue that two highest profile examples I can think of professional footballers even mentioning their sexuality, their homosexuality. An Australian player, Josh Cavallo, and a 17-year-old Blackpool youth player. That they are the boldest people to have even mentioned about coming out. What do you think is going to happen now? Do you think people are going to say, well, Liam Smith got a few laughs in a press conference, and then he, blooming heck, goes and wins the fight in spectacular fashion? That is going to tie into it. The fact that he won made it even worse. Not that it should be relevant, but it is, because success and knockout is going to be connected to his chuckles from some people. The damage is.
Even he said, like, when I saw this clip, I was like, oh God. Her comment to me on it was, I hope he knocks him out. People will then go, I hope he does knock him out. And People thought the same with Eubank's father when he was mounting. I know so many people put it. Sometimes even with Chris Eubank saying, "Oh, he was talking too much and acting so great," it was like standing like this and walking around. You won't go, "Oh, don't he get knocked out?" But at the same time, I was a huge fan of Chris Eubank because I thought he was a superb boxer. What he did with his head work, with his body movement, was just absolutely amazing and second to none. There was no one at that time as good as him. But this, like, as Keith says, that he was insulted in 2010, for example. Keith mentioned, and then it can get into chaos, but this is wrong on so many levels. We did have, there's an awful lot to, how would you say, how would this encourage a young guy? Because we've had the lauded an Irish boxer, Kelly Harrington, who won a gold medal in the last Olympics, openly saying, "I'm gay," or lesbian, excuse me, that she's lesbian, and people are lauding it. If a young boxer came out, there have been boxers who, one of them, a famous British boxer, I won't say it, committed suicide because people were basically, he'd been blackmailed because he was gay. Now, I also remember who this is, and this is just, it's awful, Andrew. But how far back has this set the whole Pride campaign, and how pointless and fruitless and idiotic is it all in the greater scheme of things? Because basically, people don't care because sports fans will lap it up.
Well, that's exactly it. They will, sports fans and fans just as guilty as the promoters. My main point at the beginning of this was saying the promoters will lap it up, because what do we think is going to happen a few months down the line? Rematch happened, big bucks. Of course, it's all about money for them, sure. But sport fans are lapping it up. Sport fans are watching this. Sport fans need to play their part in holding the sports stars they laud so highly to accountability. Will it happen? No, because people want to see a bit more needle. People want to enjoy the sport and then forget the issues around it. This has set it back so far. And look, what really sickens me is when, look, I mean, this was a disgusting show of trying to use homosexuality as an insult. Because look, this is something that for a very, very long time, but for decades and decades, has been used as an insult. But worse is that the campaigns that go on, the flashy campaigns, the noticeable campaigns, as in there's a debate about an armband at Qatar World Cup, that just drove me absolutely insane, because you're focusing about a bit of material and a word without actually taking action. Basically, my point is this: sporting authorities have shown themselves too scared to actually take real action. Real action, in my view, would take the shape of regular education for current sports stars, how to deal with the media and how to understand issues. That's not being an insult to
No. It's very direct. Very direct. And look, Keane has mentioned, for example, Justin Fashanu. Again, there was so much more with that. Nigel Owens, for example, for the Welsh referee. There's so many people who either are gay. Like, for example, for women, we know it's just accepted. It's just accepted, and there's a greater depth of humanity there as well. And kind of, okay, well, it's fine. But for example, we had this past week, and it really kicked up a storm, but it actually backfired on the idiots who wanted to make more of it than it was. And this, of course, is when Ivan Provorov, who is the Philadelphia Flyers player, refused to wear a Pride jersey on Pride night. And he said, look, and his statements were so right in everything he said. And he said it's about his Christianity. And he said, look, that, he does discriminate against nobody. All people have the right, and he said, all people have the right to love and live as they want. But that because of his faith, he doesn't accept it. What happens next? The fans, his jersey sells out. Now, okay, people say, oh, it's the far right that lapped it up. No, I believe that it's mostly people who are in the middle ground who kind of go, okay, Pride night. But you still have fans. I'm not going to name the NHL team. Watching last night, the fans screaming I'll say it now, the F word, faggot, at players. They will call them fag. Oh yeah, you're, as a sign of weakness, that you're weak. You're a fag. And you hear them screaming at players. I'm thinking, You just had Pride Night last week, folks. You know, a little bit of crop on. A little bit
Oh,
of
no,
crop.
no, Alan, it's okay. They've ticked the box. They've had a Pride Night, so they've done their job. That's it. Wash your hands of it. If the fans do any more of it, well, we've tried our best. Well, that's Pride. This is going to sound rather counterintuitive, but moments like a Pride Night, I honestly am starting to believe do more damage than good, simply because they detract from what you're actually supposed to be doing, which is making real change, or at least encouraging or facilitating real change. What a night like that simply does is say, look at us at this particular moment. We're going to focus everybody's eyes and attention on the words, but what have you actually done? Well, what will happen next? What will happen to fans, like you mentioned, who feel emboldened through lack of education, not necessarily because they deep down feel it. Provorov's stand, a lot of people will find reprehensible, but look, it is just simply a case. There are some people, rightly or wrongly, who feel culturally their background. I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm not saying it is enough to justify it, but they themselves will say, look, this is how I was brought up. But people will interpret it as, I hate gays. And that's what he
right.
And this
he shuns the LGBTQ plus community. And Flyers missed a chance to make a difference. But Jesus Christ Almighty, I mean, for example, if you, like he said, because it was Christianity, but he's not discriminating against people. I'll tell you this: my aunt and uncle, for example, one of my aunts and uncles, extreme religious, Catholic, would go on pro-life marches. Okay, say anti-abortion. Okay, anti-abortion is pro-life. Pro-abortion is anti-life. Let's balance like that. But they would go on pro-life. They would go to pilgrimages. They are two of the kindest, best people that I've met in my life, who helped me at many times. One where I almost died, actually. They actually had to get me to the hospital after a really bad concussion that ended up in a brain bleed. And literally, I was going to go off training. You know, I had training in the afternoon. I was going back in for the evening training. So anyway, they would say to live together, like extramarital sex is wrong. Homosexuality, no, it's against the Bible. But I'll tell you something. I've seen them being the nicest people, accepting when they had over to their house a friend of theirs who was gay and his partner, and they brought him in. And but our beliefs are our beliefs. But we will tell people how we believe, what we believe is right. However, they would visit me when I was with my partner, come home with Tim, and they were like, "Oh, that's fine. No, you're." They understand that, and that's what humanity is, not this bloody, as you said, box ticking. And that really drives me up the walls. When I saw this breaking during the week, I was thinking, not again, because I spoke with Philip O'Connor the week before last, a friend of our show from Reuters, who live up in Sweden. As he said, they were at a press conference, media conference in Qatar, the World Cup. And as they're doing a media conference, speaking about gay rights and who's going to wear the armband, will Harry Kane, and at that moment, the call for prayer came out. And the Arab or the Muslim people there were, okay, let's go pray. It's this thing of like that, you should believe what we believe. And if it makes me money that you believe what I believe, then you better believe it. And this is the whole thing. It's this this merchandising of beliefs and emotions. And I think for this with a hockey player, it's the same thing. So like some players don't want to take a knee. Some players want to take a knee. Brittany Griner, who would have been a great example of, she's they're calling her communist and socialist. She was, in many ways, she fought for basketball players' rights at her own expense. She went to play in Russia. She got arrested. But as we said on the show, and we nailed it, everything that happened that it turned out, we got right. Everyone else, even the conspiracy theorists, even the people who were like crying about it and saying it was so bad, they didn't actually go and dig into it and find out why she was sitting there, simply because
nobody does.
Yeah, no, because and she did. She said, Black lives matter, but also our basketball players' health matters. she also had suffered racist abuse in college and in the WNBA. Well, less in the WNBA, but she had suffered it in college. And the case, as she said, in Russia, she wasn't called names in the street. She wasn't called names by other players, by opponents. They didn't try to get under her skin. So, look, we'll take a very, very short break and come back with something more in the next one. But okay, so stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment.
No, this is okay. This is okay. No, it's okay. Okay. For me, it's more just, but the same bad words to also. I will have to keep an eye.
The Australian Open organisers, they are bracing themselves for more criticism, more abuse, and especially online and in the form of tweets from the Ukrainian ambassador to Australia and New Zealand, because Russian and Belarusian players are doing quite well in both the men's and women's categories at this year's Australian Open. 2020 Olympic silver medalist Karen Kachanov, he is, he's facing the son of I say disgraced doper Peter Korda for a place in the men's semi-finals. And Andrei Rublev, who we've just seen, he is going to battle for his place against, let's just say the Muratoglu creation, Holger Rune of Denmark, for a quarterfinal spot as well. In the women's section, this is quite interesting for us because when we look at it, the Kazakh bought Elena Rybakina. She knocked out the top seed Iga Swiatek of Poland and now faces Alyona Ostapenko of Latvia in her quarterfinal. And the very strangely and curiously late blooming Miss Pegula, of course, she is the daughter of the oligarch owners of the Buffalo Bills and the Buffalo Sabres. She is going to face veteran battler, friend of our show, Victoria Azarenka, for a place also in the next round. Meanwhile, Arina Sabalenka of Belarus, she has a chance in her fourth-round match against Belinda Bencic, the Slovak, the Swiss-born Slovak, of course, as well. Andrew, we showed the flag incident with Rublev. Now, I'll just preface that by saying earlier in the week, a Russian player was playing a Ukrainian player. There was a Russian flag with a couple of guys standing just on the outside court. They asked for it to be taken down. But actually, you weren't asked to be taken down. Now, there was going out in the mainstream media, in Russia as well. Police were called, they were stripped down the flag, blah, blah, blah. Bollocks, lies. What happened was the very vocal, and especially on Twitter, and quite, I'd say deranged, just call him deranged. He's mad in many, many ways. The Ukrainian ambassador to Australia and New Zealand. He started tweeting about this disgrace. They should take down the flag. She shouldn't be allowed. All right, fair enough. He was also saying that the players shouldn't be allowed at all. We've quoted that as well. But they were allowed. Rightly so. And they were allowed to play. Flag taken down. Okay, fair enough. There's been a provocation. At that match with a Ukrainian player, I think putting up a Russian flag was to make a statement. I think it was the most stupid thing to do. And that just showed the level of, the IQ level of the people who were there. I'm sorry. It's as I said, it's a red rag or a white, blue, and red rag to a bull. Rublev, who, as we saw at the end of that video, we wrote, stop the war. He did that at the very, very start. He stood out in his own. He faced a lot of criticism over it. He got a lot of abuse from Russians. We covered it on the radio show. We were proud of him to do it because everyone wants the war to stop. Everybody wants the war to stop, except sick, deranged people who want to keep it going, who don't want to talk. When there's officer talk, it has to happen. But Ryblov, with that, the flag being waved, he said himself, no, that's okay, it doesn't matter. But it was the abuse he was taking. And I'm going to detail the abuse now. He was called suka, which is the Russian for bitch. These people were shouting at him in Russian. There you go, logic. Shouting at him in Russian. Now, most likely they were Ukrainians who were living for a while, or could be second generation Australians. But call him suka, bitch, a number of times. They were calling him pig, svinia. They were also calling him pideras, which is a horrible derogatory form of gay. Now, let's just roll that back. Ryblov played Dan Evans previously in a tour, the British player, very, very good British player. If Russian fans were calling Dan Evans the F gay word, or just simply gay, or queer, you're queer, it would be a hate crime, they'd be arrested, they'd be thrown out. Why is it acceptable then that they're allowed to abuse a Russian using those words? Because it's very easy to use Google Translate, Andrew.
Well, I mean, you've said it all there. I mean, especially, like you mentioned, a Russian who has been about arguably the most outspoken sports star. And let's be honest, sports stars are today's spokespeople against what is happening. I mean, if he was a Russian tennis player who said absolutely nothing about what is going on in Ukraine right now, then okay, I know there are a lot of people would say that saying nothing is awful. Well, okay, that's an argument to be made. I'm not going to tell people they're wrong to think that. They are slightly missing some context of the effect of saying things has to you, your family, who, we're going down a dangerous path there, so let's avoid that. The point is here that if a player is allowed to compete in a competition, they have to be considered a player within that competition equal to all the others. If it is too much, now my point is not that, well, obviously he should have been allowed. Personally, I do think that, but it's not about whether he was allowed or not. Once he's allowed, that's it. He's a player in the tournament. Now, I agree wholeheartedly that I think the flag should have been just said, look, it's not about denying you your rights. We just want to avoid a flashpoint coming up, because it was always going to be controversial in some way or another. It was going to offend enough people to make it more of an issue than anybody would want to have a Russian or Ukrainian flag in the stands, in my opinion. This is my opinion. It's simple. I think the organisers have some blame, is what I'm saying. They should have been much clearer. Instead of initially saying, it was some ludicrous wording that I saw, their initial allowance of Russian flags. So you can have a Russian flag as long as it's not provocative. Well, what on earth does that language mean? I mean, that is basically, that's covering your back. That's allowing you to make up your mind. Well, we are determining that this is provocative. Now, I fully understand if somebody says it doesn't matter what the demeanor of the person showing it is. If you show it in the current climate, that is in itself provocative. Well, actually, I actually agree with that. People's expression of their national pride, of course that is what you should be able to do. But let's be honest, this is a relatively unique situation. So just make it simple. Just say, look, Russian fans are welcome, Ukrainian fans are welcome, Russian players are welcome, Belarusian players are welcome. But just be realistic. Please don't bring flags into the stand. You understand why. You shouldn't. It's not about us singling your country out. We're just being very, very realistic. It's a very legitimate case to be made. It could endanger public safety, because if somebody sees it and takes major offence.
Andrew, the Australians on this, they have their own domestic issues with Serbs, or people who are so far removed from Serbia, like 3-4 generations away. Same with half with Croatians, half with Bosnians, and then you've got Greeks, and they're all acting like idiots there. It was expected. The atmosphere that was whipped up, the abuse that was coming in against the organisers for allowing, correctly, legally, morally, sportingly allowing Russian and Belarusian players play, they're not under their own flags, so they're allowed to play. Okay, people bringing the flag in, I think it's ridiculous. It's something that I don't think it happens in Wimbledon. I know Arthur could probably tell us about that as well. If it happens, I don't think it does, but that was the main talking point. Now, if those guys, as I said, if they start to go on further into the tournament, it's going to cause huge problems. And I spoke with an Australian journalist yesterday, and she simply said, "Look, this is just terrible, like what's happening." And as an Australian, she is embarrassed for the behaviour of people. As she said, these people are mostly actually, not Russians and not Ukrainians or Australians, and they're acting like idiots. One thing I just want to say, and Arthur, you're watching this in Malibu, and you can just message in Pegula, this player. Okay, of course, her parents are mega. When I say mega wealthy, they are hugely wealthy. They're multi. They're billionaires, they're oligarchs. Jessica Pegula, and she's been she's 28 years of age now. Had done nothing. I mean, when I say nothing, she's only reached normally a good young US player would get a wild card into qualifying, sometimes a wild card into the main draw for the US Open. Same with, they get crossovers with Australia and so on. So the young players, they give them a chance to get a bit of money, get a bit of exposure and some ranking points. They do that. She hadn't been past a third round, hadn't been past the first round, sorry, in 6 of her 8 attempts up to last year. And suddenly she blossomed, working with David Witt, who had worked for a long, long time with Venus Williams. For me, I'm skeptical about her development. With Holger Rune, he's young. He's moving quite well, as more talking. No one's speaking about this. This is going to come back, and people are going to go, when she either fails a doping test or something really strange happens to her, we'll go to know about it. Why are we not talking about the odd things in sport, like doping, rather than the super flags things, Andrew?
Well, you know what? Actually, this has been, I would say, about the most coherent show we've done, because there's a common thread running through absolutely everything. People aren't interested. They're interested in the Instagrammable moments. A picture of a Russian or Ukrainian flag sells, attracts more likes, generates more money than undermining the morality of a sport. It's just simply the fact of life. I mean, why are we not talking about it? Well, unfortunately, we are, but because people are scared, I think, that nobody's going to listen.
That's true.
Either because they don't want to, or because they just don't want to believe that their beautiful, delicate heroes could possibly impugn their own honour. I mean, how often have we seen a completely open, honest admission of, look, you know what, I got something really badly wrong and I'm going to do something about it. The last part is the key part.
Yeah.
I mean,
even related to doping, like Peter Ball, we spoke about Valieva last week. We said that as she was a child, she's still only a child, she's 16 years of age. No way should she be banned, but her coach, her staff, her parents should be just run out of the sport, run out of the sport completely, get them out of there, because they're bad news if they allow, first of all, a child who's so sick, she needs such strong medicine to get onto the ice. They're a disgrace to their nation, disgrace to sport. Last little thing I want to mention: 10 Chinese snooker players suspended because of match fixing, including former master champion Yan Bingtao and the 2021 UK champion Zhao Hintong. Snooker match fixing, it seems all too easy. The one I always remember is the World Championship final between, I think the Masters final that would have been, between Steve Davis and Dennis, and I just blanked his name. He's from Northern Ireland.
Taylor.
Pardon?
Not Taylor, no.
Dennis Taylor, thank you. Yeah.
Dennis Taylor,
yeah. That last frame when I went down there, like trying to pot it, so, and it was, Taylor was hanging on, and there was such drama. I remember, I didn't stay to watch, but people were staying up to watch all night in Ireland. This is brilliant, it's great. But I remember someone saying they probably did that just to get the ratings up. They probably did that as,
But
I don't know.
Alan,
10 players suspended, Andrew. 10 players suspended.
look, the engineering an exciting finish. This is not new, is it? Let's be perfectly honest here. I was watching a documentary earlier this week about the NBA and the refereeing scandals that went on in the early mid-90s with various judges calling things because they were told by the organisation, look, we want games to go to the end of the seventh game of a 7-game series. This happens all the time because products sell. This is, again, it is what drives sport promoters and authorities. What sells? Tell us what sells. That's what we're going to do. We'll work it out and we will push it harder. So if it means we're going to have the media just jump on top of Manchester City against Liverpool is the new modern rivalry, it isn't anything close to a rivalry. But I mean, look, if you want a real rivalry in football, you go back to the late 90s, Arsenal, Manchester United. That was a rivalry. I'm not talking derby, I'm talking rivalry. I said they hated each other, but there was quality and there was competition. That is an actual rivalry. Now, snooker, I would argue, I'm surprised, Alan, we haven't seen far more examples of match fixing in snooker because of the nature of the game. It surely must be one of the easiest sports to match fix. You would have thought. Look, I mean, 10 Chinese players. The one thing that troubles me a little bit is that we are mentioning, and it is a fact, but we're mentioning their nationality.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not trying to suggest that we are painting that, but that's that. And again, even when we are actually talking about something that has gone wrong, it's the nationality that will grab the headlines. It won't be 10 snooker players. It won't be 10 snooker players have been done for match fixing. They came from China, but the match fixing. No, the focus will be on the nationality. We know that. Yep. It sells.
Yeah, look, I'll say just one thing before we go away for the night. I knew about it all the time from the very start working with players, Croatian tennis players, and then all the way through, even players who were, these are like a top level, like Grand Slam level players. One player won a Grand Slam for Russia, Svetlana Kuznetsova. And as they told me, every single one said the exact same thing. When they were picking doubles partners, there were some excellent players, for example, from Argentina, like top class players who were unbelievably good. But they were very good double specialists as well. They said, let's make a bit of money. We'll go win a couple of rounds and so on. And Cecilia Rodionova told me the story when people can look this up. She played doubles with an Argentinian. People say never bet when there's an Argentinian player or Argentinian doubles or a player playing because it's set up. Now, I was then immediately biased because I remember one Argentinian player, quite a good guy, Guillermo Canas, and he said, like, oh, I'll play with your player and we'll play mixed doubles. And I'm like, no. Because I was afraid it was going to be fixed. Because I was told, and then I saw the situation where the players they win a match. So at the most winnable match, they lose. I'm thinking, how did that just happen? Simply because it made more money to lose than to win. Andrew, on that note, we will say goodnight for this week. Thank you very much. We'll have Easel back with us next week. We'll have Keane McGibney as well on, and an awful more besides. So again, for the rest of the week, thank you very much, Andrew.
Pleasure as always, boss, and let's hope we've got more positive stories to talk about next week.
I think we spent an hour and a bit complaining, so here we go. Okay, and on that note, I'll say thank you all for watching and listening. Thank you to everyone who engaged with us today from Budapest, from here in Russia, then Central Russia, from America, from Ireland, Spain, Germany, Russia. Look, there's a whole list of nations here I can see flying up on my screen. Thank you very much yet again. So until next week, I'm Alan Moore saying take care of yourselves and each other.